Hey, handicappers and racing fans, welcome back to the slow train to the Travers. We've taken a long journey to get here from the Kentucky Derby through a bunch of prep races. If you saw our first slow train to the Travers earlier this year, you got a great selection in the Haskell from Mark, as well as a prediction on the emergence of Nest as a top 3-year-old. So, and if you don't know me, I'm Roger LeBlanc, author of The Punter's Tale, a bettor's quest for racetrack profits, and the Lazy Bettor's Guide to the Kentucky Derby. My guest on the slow train, as always, is handicapping author Mark Cramer from Paris, France. Mark is the author of several books on handicapping, as well as, I think, 3 novels involving handicapping and racing, as well as books on the environment and cycling and how to build better cities. The always interesting Mark Cramer, welcome back.
Hey, great to be here, Roger. Thanks for the intro. It's very flattering, and say hello to Kyle for me too.
Yeah, our production engineer here is Kyle Schaefer. Always does a great job for us. So the slow train is pulling into the station, Mark, and we've had a lot of time to read and look at videos on this train. Sometimes that's a clarifying process. Sometimes that muddies the waters a little bit. How is it for you? Do you see or feel any clarity when looking at the Travers?
Well, the problem with the clarity is that the 2 best 3-year-olds in my mind, Mo Donegal and Nest, are not in this race. And so the horses that are here, they've beaten each other, and they've had some bad luck, especially the favorite, but they were all beatable. So it's a wide open race, and I like it that way.
Yes, and we may have missed out on a couple of the top horses here, but it kind of has leveled the playing field a bit. When you look at Epicenter, the favorite, that he has been defeated by 2 horses in here. Rich Strike and Early Voting defeated him in the Preakness, and he turned the tables on Early Voting last time out in the Jim Dandy. So you're right, it's kind of a little bit of a merry-go-round here. The one way that I feel like I found some clarity here is I took a cue from your book, Thoroughbred Cycles. In that book, you mentioned constructing a narrative or looking at each horse's past performances as a story. And if you kind of go back to the beginning, the earliest past performance line, and follow the horse's story up through that, either downward in class or upward in class, changes in distances, you begin to get a picture of what this horse is capable of. And for me, well, as you know, as a novelist, Mark, it isn't all about plot, creating a good story or an enlightening story. It's the detail that you put into it. So if you say your character lives in a small house, that tells you a little bit about the character. But if you say he lived in a house not much larger than a garden shed, that kind of gives you a more vibrant picture of what's going on. So for me, the pace figures, the interior fractions, really help to create that vibrant picture of each horse's capabilities. And I know when you look at a race, are you looking at it in that way, or are you looking at it in a more jazz-like way where you're kind of looking for those unique notes?
Well, there are 2 things to answer. First, as far as the narrative is concerned, the story without the numbers is that the favorite here, Epicenter, probably was the best horse in the 2 races that he lost. recently, but finds a way of losing. He finds a way of losing. And so are you going to take a horse that's going to be maybe 7-5 who is capable of finding a way of losing? Are those odds worthwhile? So what I've done is that I've made a betting line. Now, in making the line, I do look at all the fractions, as you mentioned, and the figures, but I try to decide which figures maybe I know better than the figures that show up in the form. I try to make my own variants when I have time to do that. And for a race like for these big races, that's when we really go deep. So yes, I do look at the fractions, and I'm interested in seeing what you think about the fractions going into this race. Which horses are going to be able to handle them?
And if I kind of put these fractions into the context of grade 1 races, especially grade 1 races for 3-year-olds, what I see is horses who are not outstanding, and that probably explains why they take turns beating each other. There is nobody in this race so far anyway who has posted excellent early and late fractions together in the same race. Now, Epicenter has done it in separate races. In the LeBlanc, he set very solid and above average early fractions for a young 3-year-old. But he finished slowly, and in the Louisiana Derby, his slow finish cost him. He's come back in the Jim Dandy and really, sorry, I misspoke there. Louisiana Derby, he won. It was the LeCompte that the fractions cost him. So in the Louisiana Derby and the Jim Dandy, we've seen him go slower early and really explode late. So he's yet to put the two halves together. And I think that's a real weakness at this point. You can forgive it early in the 3-year-old season, but with as many races as he has, for him to have not put together a fast early, fast late race really shows his vulnerability. So that's my kind of overview of his pace figures. So I would agree with you there that he's vulnerable here.
Well, in my line, what I try to do is make 100% line, not 120% like the morning line. Each odds is a probability, and I have Epicenter as a most likely winner, given the level of the competition here. I have him at 5-2, which gives him a 28% chance. Now, I think 28% sounds right. And so if he wins, no surprise, but 5-2, we're not going to get 5-2 for sure. So that eliminates him from betting. Of course, I could be wrong about my probability, but I'm using all kinds of factors, and it's a combination of objective and subjective. That's why we call it a personal odds line. The number 2 horse in the line, because you were talking about horses that have not been consistent enough, but Cyberknife, if you just throw out his Kentucky Derby, which clearly was not him, and if you also consider that this horse has been taking time to learn to not be so green when he races, and that he has been improving, then I think he deserves to be the second most likely winner. It doesn't mean I'm going to bet him. Second most likely winner. So I have him with a 25% chance of winning, which translates to 3-1. Now, to bet him, I would need at least 7-2. I would need to get a higher odds than what he is in my line. And I don't know if we're going to get that either, with Cyber Night, but he is a possibility of a bet, depending on his odds. So that's the second horse in my line. The third horse in my line is the one I think that maybe I'll end up betting because he may go higher than the odds. I have him at 7-2, and that horse is Astorius. And the reason I have Astorius here is because I don't think that the figure for his last race is really so much slower than the figures that come out of these classier races. And he's an improving horse. He's the one horse who has a great right to improve. Astorius, his daddy won the Travers in the 5th career start. So he was a lightly raced horse. And at that time, he broke the Travers record. That's Arrogate. And as the son of Arrogate, Astorius is following a path that's similar to his father, lightly raced and vastly improving. So if we're projecting which horse among all of these is most likely to improve, then Astorius, who would need to improve to beat these horses, but he projects. And let me explain why I see this. Because let's take early voting as just a yardstick. He did win the Preakness. Okay, now there are horses that have raced against early voting and also raced against Astorius. Creative Minister is one. The Creative Minister was 3.5 lengths behind early voting in the Preakness and 6 lengths behind Artorius in the Curlin Stakes. And what I'm interested in is the Creative Minister, unless he's tailing off, which is possible, but basically he's a merry-go-round horse. He just runs them all alike. And he's near, but he never gets there. He doesn't have the punch, but he runs them all alike. So there we have a good marker that says that Artorius's last race in the Curlin is better figures-wise than what it looks. Then we have Gilded Age, who's in this field. I don't give Gilded Age much of a chance to win here. But just as a comparative, it's just like real estate appraisal, what we're doing here, really. We're looking for comparables. And Gilded Age finished behind early voting by 4.5 lengths and finished behind Artorius by 4 3/4 lengths. So at least with these two comparables, Artorius should be able to finish ahead of early voting. And that's why and early voting is a good horse. But he was beaten in the Wood Memorial when he was a lone front runner, and he had it all his own way. And he figures to be a lone front runner again, going longer distance. So some horse could catch him. So I have Astorius as my third most likely winner at 7-2, which means I would need at least 4-1, and maybe I'd want 9-2 to bet on him. Am I going to get it? I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like you will. And I just want to remind the viewers, we're giving you the comparables like real estate agents, but we're not charging you a fee. So you're getting a good deal here, no matter what happens. So yeah, Artorius is, for me, okay, if you look at this as the summertime derby, I'm going to disagree with you on Artorius. I think odds-wise, you make a good case, and if you look at it strictly that way, which maybe you should, he's a good play. But coming up to the Kentucky Derby, I would be very hesitant to bet a horse who had only one prep around 2 turns, especially if that prep wasn't something clearly special. So like Big Brown's Florida Derby, that was tremendously fast early and late. And there you could say, okay, this is clearly a special horse. I don't see that with Artorias. I think he may emerge as a top 3-year-old or the top 3-year-old. But I don't think it's going to be this race at 1.25 miles. To support your case, though, if you're looking at this as something as a weak grade 1 field, then the improvement he needs to make maybe isn't as great as it would usually be. So that's kind of my take on Artorias. Now, I also have a different opinion about the early pace than most people here. If you assume early voting is the likely front runner, I think you might be surprised. And that's pretty much the assumption that I've heard from like almost 100% of the analysts that I've listened to. If you look at the fastest 4 furlong splits of these horses in 2-turn races, this is how they stack up. Cyberknife ran a 46 4/5 in the Arkansas Derby. Epicenter ran a 47.0 in the LeCompte, and early voting ran a 47.3 in the Wood Memorial. That makes him almost 4 lengths slower than the best opening 4 furlongs of Cyberknife. And I'm eliminating the Kentucky Derby from that calculation because that was such a strangely fast pace in that race. But if you did include the Kentucky Derby, then the fastest horse would still be Cyberknife, who was closest to that Derby pace. So the other thing about Cyberknife is he's breaking from the 1 post. I don't think Giroux's going to have the option of relaxing early. I think he'll want to get position. And so he may let early voting take the lead, but I don't think early voting is the controlling pace here. I think Cyberknife is. This race will be run as fast as Giroux feels like it should be run on Cyberknife. And if you look at his most recent 2 races, the Matt win off a layoff at Churchill Downs, he threw down with howling time, and they blasted through fractions there and actually put up a very fast final time also. I think they were 8 lengths ahead of the 3rd place horse. So that was a 1.16 miles. It was fast early and fast late. Then Cyberknife followed that up, of course, with the victory in the Haskell, which the Monmouth track that day was super fast, was ridiculously fast. But still, you shouldn't assume that Cyberknife ran slowly because of that.
Right.
And again, he was on the pace and ran, I wouldn't say really fast late, but fast enough to say it was a true graded stakes performance there. So I think Cyberknife is the real controlling speed of the race, even though he may end up positioned second behind early voting. I think not only is he the controlling speed, he is the speed most likely to last to the wire. I agree with you about early voting. We've now seen him throw in the towel in the final 16th in 2 different stakes races. So I do not buy into the early voting as lone speed bet strategy here at all.
Well, now, like I say, I made Cyberknife my second most likely winner, 3-1 in my odds line, which means that I could bet him at 7-2. And we might get 7-2 on Cyberknife because other horses are going to get bet, like Zandon, who we haven't talked about, who I figure maybe he's going to finish in 3rd place. He's the type of horse that likes to finish 3rd. I don't have him low enough in my odds line to be able to consider him a likely enough contender to bet on him. I have him at 8-1, but I do have a little warning on Zandon in the sense that Pratt at this moment, I take these long shot jockey and trainer standings, and Pratt is getting close to catching Saez as the leading long shot jockey. In the last few days, he's really been hot. So I think Pratt is reaching a peak. And so Zandon, who I don't really like to, he just hasn't had any great races. But if everything falls apart and Pratt measures his time, paces himself, then Zandon could surprise me and destroy my odds line. But I still have him at 8-1. But I think that I also think that he could be in the trifecta.
Yes, and especially with Pratt up. I love the way that Pratt finishes a race. He really finishes strong, like a top turf jockey, and so he fits this horse really well. And I agree with you, though, we haven't really seen enough of him. He seems to be a cut below Epicenter, but as in the Derby, the pace falls apart, then he may be the one there. The other horse I wanted to mention briefly, speaking of the pace falling apart, Rich Strike is the horse everyone looks to as picking up the pieces if the pace is really hot. I think you should take a second look at Gilded Age, the Bill Mott horse. He's come home pretty fast in his races. Bill Mott isn't usually one to go for the glory and just enter a horse because he wants to be there for the party. If the pace falls apart, if I were looking for a real long shot, that would be my long shot. I'm not crazy about him, but as a plan B at those odds, maybe a little bit of action on him for me.
Yeah, well, Rich Strike, we can't not talk about Rich Strike. He won the Kentucky Derby, and he has the look of, I gave him a couple of points in my odds line, and I didn't throw him out, that's for sure, because he looks a lot like this horse, Keen Ice, who won the Travers maybe about 10 years ago. And where nobody expected him because he was a deep closer, and then everything fell apart and he won the Travers. He looks a little like that. Now, Gilded Age, I looked hard at Gilded Age, but then I see that he was really embarrassed by Artorias. And so wanting to put Gilded Age higher in my line, which I couldn't do, because if I did that, then Artorias, I mean, what would I do with Artorias? So I really think that, have to be, try to be objective here. And Artorias does have, there's one blemish here, is that the dam, who is a good dam, Paula's Silver Lining, was a 6.5 furlong sprinter. So that might be a little bit problematic, although her dad was a good long distance router. But, so in the end, I've got a possible bet with Cyberknife at 7, if I get 7-2, and a possible bet on Artorias if I get 9-2. And I just think that who is the horse that's most likely to improve? Cyberknife is improving every time, by the way.
He is. And the one thing that I also want to mention about this field and about Cyberknife is if you take the graded stakes rankings at face value, you have Cyberknife as a double winner of grade 1 stakes. He won the Arkansas Derby and the Haskell. So that's 2 grade 1 victories in 3 tries. His only other try was the Kentucky Derby. Epicenter doesn't have a grade 1 win. So he's behind both Rich Strike early voting and Cyberknife in that regard. So if you're trying to establish class and you take these stakes rankings at face value, then Epicenter comes up 4th. So maybe you could make Cyberknife the if I were making a personal line, I would make Cyberknife the favorite and knock Epicenter down and at least a notch.
Well,
So
also in my novel, Please Hold All Tickets, one of the characters, several of the characters actually would bet on 2 horses per race. And it's possible you could bet 2 horses to win in this race if you get your odds. So I'm looking at both of these two, Cyberknife and Artorias. And by the way, if I may, I don't know if it'll come up here or not, but I learned show and tell
all
in the
right.
2nd grade. Mrs. Jane, my 2nd grade teacher. So I wanted to practice my show and tell skills.
That was Mark's fabulous novel featuring handicappers and handicapping strategies. It's called Please Hold All Tickets. You can pick it up at lazybettorusa.com, postage free in the United States even. How can you turn down a deal like that? Or you could buy it for Amazon and support an evil corporate giant. So Andy, I think we're close to wrapping up. So Mark, you've given us 2 possibilities here, Artorias or Cyberknife, depending on what odds you get. And I'm going with Cyberknife as a pretty solid play for me. I'll just take a little flyer on Gilded Age, just so I have an excuse to drink tequila or something if he wins. But but Cyberknife's my pick for the Travers Stakes. Hit subscribe. Tell us who you like in the comments section in the Travers. It's really it looks like a good challenging race both for handicappers and the horses in it. I'm looking forward to it, Mark, and thank you for being here and offering your opinion. You have any closing thoughts or words for us?
I think just that this shows you how great horse racing is, because you get to solve these tremendous puzzles, and maybe they'll save me from getting Alzheimer's disease. Who knows? By reading the racing form.
I think it's if anyone did a study, it might be the most dependable, not cure, but most dependable prevention of that particular condition. So, well, thank you for being with us, Mark. Again, hit like, subscribe. Go to lazybettorusa.com for lots of good content, or to sign up for our Racetrack Super Scout service. Thank you for watching, and good luck in the Travers, everyone.